Okay, so Leslie, so y'all got married and get married later in life. And so did you realize that there was going to be maybe a struggle with infertility, or did you just think you were going to, try to have kids right away, or what was your thought through that?
Well, we knew that being married later in life, brought our chances of getting pregnant down some, but we didn't know the struggle that it would really be. So within a few months, we had decided, okay, let's start trying to get pregnant after we got married, just a few months after that. And so, we talked to the doctor, my OBGYN, and she was, just after probably a year, it was time to go, okay, let's do some testing. And it was at that point that they shared with us, both of us had some issues, and that our chances of getting pregnant, they said, were like 0.5%.
Wow.
So, which we know God is bigger than 0.5%, and I knew that.
Yeah.
So we never, there was a lot of tears, and yet it made me seek the Lord more for what His plan was. So.
Absolutely. Well, take us through that journey of maybe just realizing that it's the 0.5%, like you said, that God's way bigger than that. But tell us, what was the biggest truth of going through that infertility, where you realized that, God was growing you through it? What was the biggest truth that you learned through that?
I remember it was a Wednesday that we had went to the doctor, and they shared all this news with us. And I don't know, I just remember that night about midnight, going to bed and not being able to sleep, and getting up around midnight and going to the couch with my Bible and my journal, and I just said, God, I need to meet with you. And I did a lot of crying and a lot of praying, and just saying, I just need peace. If you want my children to be the girls that I disciple, and I have such a heart for discipleship and for discipling these teenage girls and these college girls, if that's going to be my children, I just need a peace from you. And so that was a Wednesday night, and I sat there, and I remember He gave me verse after verse. One of them is Psalm 113:9, and it says, I will settle the barren woman in her home as a happy mother of children. And so, of course, I wrote all these verses down. I still have them written to this day. And just every verse was on motherhood. And it wasn't something, I didn't do a word study on motherhood, which I'm big on word studies.
Oh, I love them. I love word studies.
Me too. They're some of my all-time favorite. But that night, I just felt like the Lord sat down on the couch with me and just gave me peace enough to go back to bed and be reminded that He was in control. And so the next morning I woke up, and I'm not gonna lie, I was still a little frazzled. And normally I would go straight into the office and in the student ministry, but I knew that Miss Donna had a Bible study that morning on Thursday mornings, her discipleship group, and she'd always given me an open-ended come when you can kind of thing. And so I just was like, I need to be with women. And this is one of those things that you will just never forget. I call it stones of remembrance, where you say, this is that stone that I remember the Lord spoke specifically. And so I went over to the Bible study, had no idea what they were doing, the discipleship, and sat down with them. There's probably about 20, 25 ladies in there, which I have to preface too by saying 3 women in that Bible study had babies in their 40s. Can you believe that?
Really?
It was just like one of those things that later on I realized that was like, wow, God, you specifically even placed that part in there.
Just those details. I love it.
Just details, yes. And so, anyway, they said, okay, we're going to open up our Bibles to Genesis chapter 15. And so we did, and it was all on Abraham and Isaac, and Abraham talking with the Lord, saying, Lord, since I have no children, will my servant be the heir to my kingdom? And the specific words of the Lord in my NIV Bible was, no, your servant will not be an heir. You will have a son coming from your own body. And I felt like the whole room disappeared that day. I was just like, and so I could not wait to get out of that Bible study. That sounds bad, but to go home and tell my husband. I really feel like the Lord had given us a word.
Wow.
And to this day, I can quote you that because I felt like it was a specific word for me. But I had prayed specifically, God, I need a word from you. And so, I don't know if that's...
No, that's perfect.
I'll just stop there. I can talk a lot about it.
No, that's awesome. I love that you can pinpoint exactly that word that he gave you. Because you asked for a word, and he gave you, and that's a clear word. I mean, and we're on the other side of that, and you're like, that's a clear word right there, for sure. Okay, so, and this kind of goes in there. What would you say to someone who is struggling? How did you go through that, and what would you say to her? What would be an encouraging word that you would say to that woman going through that?
I would say, don't be afraid of your emotions, but fight them out with the Lord. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but a lot of times we get mad at the Lord and we close him off, and we kind of distance ourselves when things don't go the way we thought they were going to go or the way we planned them to go. And so I always go back to 1 Samuel chapter 1 with Hannah, where Hannah was, dealing with her own infertility issues. And if you read chapter 1, you're going to see where it says, in bitterness of soul, she wept much and prayed to the Lord. So she dealt with bitterness, and I love walking myself through that or other women through those passages. Because she said, oh, Lord, if you'll only look upon your servant's misery. And it says she kept on praying. And so, and then it goes on, and Eli thought she was drunk and said, why have you been drinking? She said, not so, my Lord. I'm a woman who is deeply troubled. I've been pouring out my soul to the Lord. And so, and then the next two, she says, I have been praying here out of my great anger and grief. And so every time I read that, I'm reminded of we as women have crazy emotions, and the Lord is not closed off by that.
Wow.
Because the thing Hannah did was she fought it out with the Lord. She cried, she wept, she took her bitterness, her anger, her great anger, her grief, her misery, and cried and prayed with the Lord. And I've learned so much from that, that the Lord loves us enough to know our emotions, and and it says she went away and she ate something, her face was no longer downcast. And the cool thing was her circumstances had not changed, but her mindset had. She had freedom in the Lord. She still didn't have a child, but she went away in peace. And so to me, that was huge for me, that I could fight it out with the Lord, and he understood that part of me.
That's a great word. That's a great word that anybody can take away. It's totally that mindset. You're right, because her circumstances hadn't changed, but her mindset had. I like that. So, tell me this. Okay, so you get married later in life. You desire children. You can't get pregnant. Now what?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, number one, we never quit trying.
Right.
You're just like, okay, Lord, you're still able, so we'll keep trying.
Right.
But we also said, okay, are there any other options out there? And I did actually get to mentor a teenage girl who it's a long story, but was pregnant and was wanting to put her baby up for adoption, and we met with an adoption lawyer and talked about that, and she ended up miscarrying. So, when you're on a journey, there's just going to be bumps in the road, and we're like, okay, Lord, that door closed.
Right.
There were just doors we kept praying, okay. But there was one day, or 1 week, I'll never forget, and this was probably, we got married 2008. So I'm saying this is closer to 2009, like the spring or summer. And 3 times in 1 week, I read or heard about embryo adoption. And so I was like, So I remember reading an article. I don't even remember where I was, but I remember it was in a Good Housekeeping magazine.
Oh, really?
Wow, that's really interesting. And then I heard a Focus on the Family had a big thing on it. A friend of mine sent me a link one time and was like, hey, I want you to read this. I saw this, and I don't know why. I just felt like the Lord wanted me to send it to you.
Wow.
All on embryo adoption. All in 1 week.
Wow.
You're like, okay, I'm listening.
I'm getting it. Wow.
So me being the researcher I began to research everything I could get my hands on. I mean, I had folder after folder after folder, and I presented it to my husband, and he was like, "That is the craziest thing I've ever heard." He was not as on board as I thought he would be. And so, being the spiritual person that I am,
yes,
I called a bunch of my godly mom friends over one night for prayer for Ronnie, and it actually backfired on me. That they was like, Leslie, you need to put all that in the drawer, and you never need to push him to do anything he's not ready to do. And so I was like, wow, that wasn't what I was expecting, but
you're like,
I did that. I chose not to bring it up, and I wasn't going to push him to do something because you never want them questioning should they have done something.
Sure.
And so I put it in the drawer and didn't mention it for probably, I didn't mention it in a while, but probably about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 months later. I've got it all written down somewhere, all the dates, but I won't go into dates. But it's about 6 or 7 months later, Ronnie ran into a couple that used to be in the singles department with him, and they were now married, and they were now pregnant through embryo adoption.
Really?
And so, so he was able to really sit and talk with them, and then he set up a time for us to have lunch with them after they had the baby. Like, they were due any day now. So after the baby was born and was about a month old, I think he just needed to see a real human face with that. I know that sounds crazy, but embryo adoption is such a unique new thing to him. So, and it was just a sweet time. I giggle because I think I knew more than the lady who just had the baby because I have researched
because all you're researching
on this. Yes.
Well, you're a true teacher, elementary teacher. We're going to research everything.
So we are. So it was fun to just kind of watch God again unfold that in His timing. And it just taught me, those sweet ladies taught me so much about laying it down. Keep praying, but, God does not need us to manipulate His plan. And as a woman, it's so easy for us to manipulate. So easy.
Well, when was the point of when y'all decided this is the right way? Like, there was a piece in his heart, a piece in your heart, where it was like, this is the path we need to take.
We went through that summer and without making any decisions. And then around the fall, we talked about it more, though. We did, and I researched for him, and I showed him all I'd researched. And, okay, this is another thing we had to lay down. Most adoption agency, and this is interesting, but most adoption agency, including embryo adoption, will not talk with you about adoption until you've been married 3 years.
Really?
And so that's another reason we didn't pursue it at that time, because we would not have been married 3 years until April of
the next
2010. 2011. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was interesting for us that we had to wait that. So, but we called them, I say them. The NEDC is the National Embryo Donation Center located in Knoxville, Tennessee. And do you want kind of the background of how they came to be so you'll understand?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. When people do IVF, they a lot of times create a lot more embryos than they need. And so, therefore, they have to choose what they want to do with the embryos. And the NEDC is a pro-life and Christian organization. And so, people can donate embryos to other couples.
It's amazing.
And so, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? And so, there's over 500,000 frozen embryos out there right now.
Wow. And
not all of those will be up for adoption, because people will go back and that have done the IVF and try to have more of their own children.
Gotcha.
But there's many times they will create up to 12 to 15 embryos. And then they have to decide what they want to do with those embryos. And so they can donate them to science. Heaven forbid they don't do that.
Right.
Or they can just let them die. Or they can donate them to other couples. And so the NEDC is where they can donate them to.
Wonderful.
So we went through the NEDC. We called them in December 2010, they said we could go ahead and start our home study. We did have to do a home study.
Okay.
And even though in the state of Tennessee, embryo adoption is not really considered adoption, we had to do it for the NEDC. But in the state of Tennessee, it's sad to say that embryo adoption is actually considered a transfer of property. Isn't that sad?
Wow.
That just breaks my heart. Yeah. And so, therefore, we didn't have to necessarily go before a judge like you would in a normal adoption, but we did have to have a home study and, you know, get all the letters of recommendation and all that for the NEDC and let her come and, you know, look at her home and all of that. So we had that completed in March of 2011. And our anniversary was on April 12th, 2012, and we met with the NEDC with everything already done on the 14th. We went to Gatlinburg for our anniversary and just stayed in Knoxville and went over there and met with them. And, you know, of course, there's a lot of invasive stuff to check my body to make sure I can carry a baby and all of that. But we had our embryos adopted by May. Can you believe that? So a month later, we actually could have had them transferred in July, but Ronnie wanted to wait till the summer was over.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, so they do them every other month.
Okay.
And so in September of 2011, we had 3 beautiful embryos transferred into my womb. And I had to go through a lot during the summer also to get ready for that.
Sure.
A lot of shots and, you know.
Medicine.
There's a whole gamut of things you have to go through.
So it's like at the beginning, it would be like you were going through the IVF process with the shots and everything, not the retrieval part of it, but the shots and everything to get ready, and then where they put the embryos in to get ready for that.
Yeah, and so it was really just it was a beautiful experience. In all honesty, the NEDC was amazing to work with. Dr. Keenan was our doctor, and he was fabulous. And so we had 3 sibling embryos that we adopted and transferred in. And man, those babies were prayed over. Let me tell you, I have to say this. You know, discipleship is my heart, and that day, I'd been discipling several girls, and they walked through this process with me, high school, college girls, mainly college girls at that time. And you know, that day, 3 girls fasted and prayed all day on behalf of these embryos.
Wow.
It's just, to me, I just always think back to that. And 2 girls went, and during the hour that we were doing the transfer, the doctor was doing the transfer, they were in the prayer room praying during that hour. So, you know, it's just again, I get teary-eyed when I think about the whole thing, because just the fact that, you know, that God knew exactly who we were going, you know, before the beginning of time, who we were going to get to parent, but how many people got to be a part of that journey with me sometimes is overwhelming. So.
And that's what I was going to ask is how, that's awesome. That is amazing. And their faith was strengthened through that when they see what you're going through, and they're fasting and praying. And these are college girls. That's huge.
They were. It was huge to me. My faith was strengthened through them. And so I will forever be indebted to just how many people, and I will say this. We went up there, it was a Tuesday, but on Sunday night, before my husband's birthday is the 18th, and the embryos were transferred on the 20th. But on the 18th, we had a bunch of people, about 6 couples over to kind of celebrate Ronnie's birthday, but it was more as they prayed over us. It was 6 couples we wanted to pray over us before we went. And so just the amount of people that we just tried to involve, and this is, we feel like what God has called us to do. And so it was just a unique, fun journey that I just feel like the Lord kind of always takes me down the long road, but it's okay.
Well, and I was going to ask you how open, it seemed like y'all were very open about this. And that's what a lot of people, I know when I first was going through infertility, I didn't share it for a couple years. So I love how open y'all are about, that you were about it and now are. I mean, you've been open the whole time about it. And so I I think that's the only way to do it, honestly. Looking back, I wish I had opened up earlier, you know? So I like that. I appreciate that about y'all. So love how open y'all were.
Wow. Thanks for letting us share. And I do feel like God has allowed me to be a voice in different ways because we are so pro-life and believe that life begins at conception and that these, many people call it the frozen orphanage, you know,
really?
Where all these little babies are waiting to be adopted. And so it's been really fun. The numbers of women in the last 4 years since 5 years since my husband and I went through this journey, but 4 years since my son Hudson was born, that I've gotten to talk to. That through even just this week, I had a girl email me about 7 questions about embryo adoption. So I just sat down and typed out, you know, the answers that I felt like the Lord wanted. And I've had numerous phone calls just because people I don't know, you know, adoption is beautiful in any form. But as a woman, for me, it was a joy to get to go through the birth process. You know, I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Not everybody enjoys carrying a baby, but for me, it was just, I did. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Well, and back to the word the Lord gave you at that Thursday morning Bible study, you knew, you know, that was the word He gave you, that you desired to give birth. You know, you wanted to do that.
You know, from the moment and when we went for our first ultrasound, and you know, we knew we were pregnant, but we just didn't know how many we were.
Yeah,
pregnant.
I was going to ask that too.
Yeah, and so when they told me, you know, I mean, there was grief that God had chosen to take 2 of these babies, but at the same time, there was joy that we knew we were pregnant. And I will tell you, I don't even know how to explain it, but I never doubted that I was having a son because the Lord had given me a word.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't even have a girl name picked out. It was just, he's a boy. It's a boy. Yeah. And we found out we were pregnant on October 4th, 2011, and found out that it was a boy on January 10th, 2012, and so we had a big reveal party and all that, you know, so it was really fun.
Well, that's great. I love how you, explained it, because at first, you know, I think there's a lot of confusion about it, or maybe just not clear facts about what embryo adoption is, and I just love that it's adoption. You are adopting a frozen embryo. I mean, that is just, that's so huge. I mean, you know, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this is all, you know, a foreign thing, but now it's like you said, it's pro-life. And I love that you told me about this company that does that they are pro-life, and they're a Christian-based company that can give life to these, you know, to parents that are desiring to adopt, and for these little embryos that are waiting for families. I mean, really, that's huge. It's mind-boggling.
If you go to the NEDC page, on the Facebook page, I follow them, but they just had 3 triplet, beautiful little African American girls born, and they had been frozen as embryos. I want to say it's either 14 or 16 years.
Really? See, I didn't even know this was existing. Then I'm late to the party, but whoa, really?
Yeah. Yes.
How exciting.
I just thought that was interesting.
That is. I really didn't think it existed that long ago, honestly.
Our son had been frozen about 3 years. So it's crazy to even think about that, too.
That is. Okay, so he just turned 4, and so life is just energetic and just joyful, and you're just grateful to God and awesome. Every day, every night when I pray over him, I will be honest. I say, thank you, God. Thank you for allowing me to be his mommy, you know, because he is such a gift. He is such a fun little gift and a sweet spirit. So you know that. You have a son. We all know that. Yeah. About our baby boys, yes. Feel that. We feel that. Especially going through infertility. You just, just grab a hold of those. Something about their boys and their mamas, too. Woo, I'm telling you. Yeah. Yes, woo. It gets you hard. It gets you.